Welcome to Tuesday. It's IB Nation Sports Talk. How you doing? Well, Jesse, I'm just going to skip the formalities today. I'm not going to waste any time because apparently, not only did Lou Holtz trigger Ryan Day, we managed to trigger Bucknuts Nation yesterday with our rapid fire. We, like the rapid fire video went up on YouTube, and you've seen some of the comments. Are there any clean ones that we can mention here that that your Buckeye brethren have thrown up there on the YouTube post?
Yeah, I think I found a pretty funny one. I think it kind of sums up all of the comments really. So I'll go ahead and read it now. It's from just an hour ago, actually. Lou Holtz was Ohio State's 12th man. Lou should have remained humble and kept his thoughts to himself. If Lou remains quiet and meek, Notre Dame wins that game 9 times out of 10.
So it took Lou Holtz to motivate Ohio State. They weren't good enough to come into Notre Dame Stadium on their own and win. They needed Lou Holtz to inspire them, to give them the motivation they needed because they were told that they weren't physical enough. And Ryan Day's manhood was challenged. I mean, come on. Isn't that what this is all about, really?
Yeah, that's what it boils back to, in my opinion, is Ryan Day's manhood being questioned because he's being a question about his team's lack of physicality against some of these big opponents in the last 2 or 3 years.
Yes, exactly. And so today, Lou Holtz went on the Dan Dakich show, and I'm not sure exactly what it's called. He used to be on Indianapolis radio. I don't know that he's necessarily there anymore, but he went on with Dan Dakich, said that he called Marcus Freeman to apologize for providing Ohio State with their motivation on Saturday. He said he shouldn't have said it, but he stands by his comments that Ohio State was not the more physical team in its losses under Ryan Day. And he went on to say this about Ryan Day, quote, "I can understand why he did. He doesn't want to talk about Michigan 0-2. He doesn't want to talk about the big game coming up against Penn State and against Michigan again. He's a great coach. He's done a tremendous job. He's a great offensive mind. He hired an outstanding defensive coordinator from Oklahoma State. I think he's doing a tremendous job. Ohio State's a good football team. I don't think they're a great football team. He can go after me all he wants." End quote. Lou Holtz today with Dan Dakich on Ryan Day.
I don't disagree with anything that he said. And to be honest with you, I thought Notre Dame was the more physical team again on Saturday, right? And I know it's, it doesn't matter now, and it's all in the past, and I don't want to get too much talking about, this whole topic, but Notre Dame was more physical than Ohio State on Saturday. It just so happened that Ohio State, as it's been talked about, snuck out a win at the end of the day.
Yep. I mean, it's the way it played out. It wasn't about
Listen,
physicality.
the thing about Ryan Day is he's a great offensive mind. He's a subpar head coach. But when you walk into Ohio State,
good recruiter though, you have to give him the recruiting.
He's a good recruiter.
He's raking in the recruits. You have to give him that. And as we've talked about before on this show, being a good recruiter, good/great recruiter, is part of being a good/great college football coach. That does factor into the equation, whatever percentage you want to give it.
But coming down to like the day-to-day, head coaching, I know he has a great record and all that stuff, but he walked into a room where it's awfully hard to fail. All of the hard work.
Would you say he was born on third base?
Yeah, I would say that. Yeah. It's hard.
One of the things I agree with Jim Harbaugh on, the guy was born on third base.
That's what I mean. He didn't actually have to roll up his sleeves
and
get dirty with it, and I think that's ultimately boils down to who Ryan Day is and what he's going through right now and the questions of his, I guess, quote unquote manhood. Is this overall overlying issue is he's never had to get down in the trenches and get gritty with it. You know what I mean? Like he's walked into a room that Urban Meyer built and just was handed the keys and was told, to keep recruiting at a high level and a lot of things would take care of itself. But now that he actually has to coach, gain day-to-day logistics, week-to-week logistics against Michigan's, Notre Dame's, Penn State's, he's had a little bit more adversity, and I think you're starting to see that.
Yeah.
He's still a great coach. I just don't think he's like Lou Holtz said, he's not a great coach.
I just don't understand why. Like, literally, when was the last time you heard from Lou Holtz before the Pat McAfee show on Friday? And like Ryan Day, I guess he's got the obvious connection to Notre Dame, but Ryan Day acts like this is like, you know, even Lee Corso, who's on College Game Day every weekend, he acts like this is like some great college football pontificator or something. Lou Holtz means a lot to the Notre Dame fan base, but it's so odd that this is what he's clinging to. And our buddy Pete called me today and make sure that we mention that all of Day's reaction, in case this wasn't specified yesterday in the video that Bucknuts Nation is getting riled up about, it's all about his own insecurities. The whole
Correct.
I love my team, Ohio versus everyone, all that crap is just Ryan Day cloaking himself in this layer of protection to try to say, oh, you know, that it wasn't about him, when really it is all just about Ryan Day and his own securities at the end of the day. That's what it's all about.
Yeah, and there is another, oh crap, let me find it here. There was another really good comment in here. It's kind of like the complete opposite, and kind of
was it actually good, or was it just hilarious?
It's actually good. And no, this one is basically literally just playing off of what you just said. So this comment says, I'm an Ohio State fan. Everyone loved the post-game passion. I hated it. He let everyone know how rattled a realistic comment could make him. He heavily insinuated that it ruined several days for him, and the players had to calm and reassure him. That's my personal issue with Day. I don't like the way he hides behind his players' talents. I hated the way he took sole credit for a play call, but blamed the bad play calls on player execution. I'm not saying I know of a better coach to take the job. I just know that Ryan wouldn't have this position if the raw skill of the players didn't always bail him out.
Wow. That's from an Ohio State fan, rational Ohio State fan. Good comment.
And I think that literally just sums up what you just talked about. He hides behind the skill of his players to mask his own insecurities as a head coach.
How could it have ruined several days of his when the comment was made just a little bit more than 24 hours?
He must have heard it immediately.
It's the amplification of social media, I guess. You know, minutes seem like days, days seem like weeks. I don't know. Anyway, Brian says Ohio State fans need approval from others. One of the most successful football programs, and that alone is not enough to satisfy their fan base. And I just saw it looked like we had a Buckeye fan hanging out in here. I can't find the comment now. Maybe he deleted it already. I don't know. Well, anyway, let's move on from that. I just thought it was obviously worth mentioning that Lou Holtz apparently did call Marcus Freeman and apologize for the comments. Again, there he is, Frank Caroni 6. I love the win. It was great. Yeah, I mean, if you're an Ohio State fan, there he is.
I mean, that's the thing about this
Great
game.
win.
It was a great game. Unfortunately, it ended with a gut punch right at the end. You know, like that game is great no matter what, but obviously it's always going to leave a bad taste in your mouth, whether or not you're Notre Dame or Ohio State, depending on how that last play of the game went. And I think that's the most upsetting part I had of going, getting into the thick of it, I guess I should say, the post game, everything that transpired, right? That's the part I have the most frustration with, is Ohio State fans can't simply admit that Notre Dame played a tremendous game and they snuck it out at the end of the day, right? Like I had an Ohio State fan text me and tell me, Ohio State played like crap and they have to play better when the opponents get better because they're going to get better, referring to Michigan and Penn State. And it's like Notre Dame forced Ohio State into that mold. They did what they wanted to do execution-wise to make Ohio State, only score 17 points the entire game. Like, it was a tremendous football game all around, but because Ohio State snuck it out at the end, there's so many other things that people want to talk about rather than it just being a really good football game.
That's a game like this, as close as it was, the outcome was going to mask certain things for whoever won the game, and the loss was just going to amplify. Like, if Ohio State had lost, the conversation is a lot different. Ryan Day isn't going to go nuts about Lou Holtz for one, and we wouldn't be talking about this whole thing. And they would be talking about, like Frank is talking about, the Ohio State defense was great for almost 3 quarters. If Notre Dame had managed to milk the clock for that last possession, they'd be talking about how their defense couldn't come through in the clutch, and their offense was only able to score 10 points against this, whatever Notre Dame team that they wanted to call it. Bill Walsh says, per Pro Football Focus, Notre Dame outplayed Ohio State in all 12 performance categories. Man, they must feel lucky to get out of town with the double.
Let me, based off of that, I just want to share a screen real quick. This is just a cool graphic. If you want to bring this up, I sent this to you the other day.
I didn't know what any of this meant. So
I kind of figured. So I'm
glad you could explain it. You and your graphs and your charts and what does this even mean?
I follow this guy on Twitter. He's like probably the best in terms of like statistics. Like the guy is just a genius. He puts together his own stats and own graphs and all that stuff. But what I want to show here is how did, and you can read the title, did we really get beat that bad? And so what this is every team across the 0 axis right here are all the teams that lost.
0 axis is the straight line.
The straight line, the X axis. If you are on that axis, you lost. So Auburn lost, Ole Miss lost.
Gotcha.
And so on this end, it simply means that the team that beat you just performed out of the world, right? Like there was really nothing that could be done. They're just a better team. I mean, like look at the Oregon and Colorado.
So what you're saying is, based on what this graph says, Ohio State beat Notre Dame. Here are 2 examples. Ohio State beat Notre Dame. Florida State beat Clemson. They are both below the 0 line. So that means the team that played worse in the game actually won the game in those 2 cases.
Correct. And if you look at it even closer, there's only 2 games that were, worse than Notre Dame's in this instance. Georgia Tech, and it looks like, is that NC State against UMass or UNLV? I can't see who's all the way there on the left.
That is actually New Mexico against UMass.
Lobos, yep, New Mexico. So, yeah, I guess and again, I'm not trying to beat it, over and over again, because a lot of people know that this is already real, the realism of how the game turned out.
Yeah.
But
LSU over Arkansas is also below the line, by the way. LSU below the line. So
right.
Just as another example. Okay.
So I just thought that was kind of interesting to share.
It was.
And so when you tell an Ohio State fan that Notre Dame played better, they just unfortunately lost. I mean, it's statistically proven. Ohio State didn't play better in that game, but they won. And that's that's the part that I think really stings the most.
Yeah, and I mean, we're going to talk about some good. We're going to talk about. Do you want to, like Bill Walsh would say, do you want to just throw out your a couple of your good takeaways from this first, or do we want to, kind of like get in the mud a little bit and talk about some of the concerns coming out of it that are kind of lingering still that maybe we didn't get to touch on?
I'd like to go with the good stuff, because I think I have more to talk about the good stuff. And I feel like the good stuff is stuff that needs to continue to go on throughout the season, because, I mean, let's face it, Notre Dame probably has the toughest 4 weeks out of any team in the country. And I'll die on that stone or hill, whatever it's called, in saying that, because, I mean, they have 4 straight 7:30 p.m. games.
Let's save that. We got that coming up in rapid fire.
And they're all against teams that are really good, like Duke undefeated, Louisville undefeated, USC undefeated, and then obviously last week's game against Ohio State.
Keith says, in other words, we only sucked the last 4 minutes. I mean, that's basically what yesterday's show was all about. And I think when you boil it down, unfortunately, those decisions had a big impact on the outcome. Frank saying to Jesse, the Sunday morning newspaper under the sports section just show the wins and losses. There's a Sunday morning newspaper? I didn't. Where do you get those? I didn't know.
Those are still around?
They still come out? The Sunday morning newspaper here in town has Friday's high school results. I don't know anything about what what Sunday morning newspapers mean. I'll tell you what. I asked you what you wanted to do, but I'm just going to call an audible because I want to talk about a couple things first, and then we can get to your always live on the bright side of your life stuff. So for a second straight game, they had time on the clock and timeouts to use, but they decided not to try to at least get into field goal range. And I tell you, Vince and I were talking about this in the moment the last 2 weeks. It goes back to Central Michigan and the other night against Ohio State as well. They had 26 seconds on the clock and 2 timeouts at the end of the first half, and they opted not to kick the field goal. And here's what Marcus Freeman had to say when I asked him about that.
You know, I often have a saying, right? You win or you learn. And last year at Ohio State, the very same situation happened. Okay, and on first down, we had 1 timeout. No, Ohio State I think had 2 timeouts. And first down, I wanted to take a shot, but it was miscommunication. We ran the ball. The second down, we threw it, and Ohio State had time to call a timeout and still get possession. And I didn't want that to happen. They had 2 timeouts. I can't remember what happened, but I knew if we took a shot on the very first play, they could call timeout on second down and third down and still get the ball back. And so I didn't want to put our offense or team in that situation. And so that's where we made the decision, hey, let's just take a knee and take it in at half.
So there's Marcus Freeman's explanation. And Estime says, why defer to the second half if you're not going to take advantage of the extra possession? 2 weeks in a row, Notre Dame had taken a knee going to the half with time on the clock and timeouts in their pocket. So what did you think of Marcus Freeman's explanation? He's basically saying, well, we had timeouts, but Ohio State had timeouts as well. So they were guarding against, if there's an incompletion or they don't gain a yard, they were guarding against giving Ohio State any opportunity to try to go score again before the end of the first half.
I'm just going to be point blank honest about this one. I don't like Marcus Freeman's response, and I think it was sort of a bailout or a cop-out on his side because, listen, I just went back and I double-checked in the box score when Notre Dame got the ball back. They got the ball back with 26 seconds. If you go through a three down possession and maybe you throw 3 straight incomplete passes, that's like 4 or 5 seconds off the clock. So you're looking at punting the ball back to Ohio State with roughly, worst-case scenario, 10 to 12 seconds left on the clock. They're not going to run a play and throw a Hail Mary and score. And so I think it was a bogus excuse on behalf of Marcus Freeman. And to me, it shows, I think he was hiding his underlying issue of he didn't want to make a mistake. He didn't want to give Ohio State the ball and let them get another score right before the half. And I think that's inexcusable because you have to show confidence in your quarterback. This is a 6-year quarterback. It's not like last year where Tyler Buckner, his first start ever is going against Ohio State. I get that. But Marcus Freeman's biggest point of emphasis from last year this year is that they needed to be aggressive and they needed to take their shots. And it wasn't last year's game plan. And when he said that, it basically was hypocritical because he was playing how he was last year.
And it contradicts what he said about the end of the game. He said at the end of the game when they had the ball that they didn't want to play not to lose, that they were trying to play to win and be aggressive and make plays. Okay, well, again, just like you said, if you break it down, you by the time you punt, at best, Ohio State's probably going to have 12 seconds left, assuming you go 3 plays, don't run any time off the clock. And again,
it's like 3 straight incompletions.
Yeah, I mean, this is after prior to Central Michigan. They scored a touchdown 3 plays in 30 seconds against North Carolina State, 6 plays, 38 seconds against Tennessee State. And what did we say when they were running those 2-minute drills? It's like that gives you the confidence that you can do it. Now, I realize that Ohio State is obviously a much better team than either one of those teams, but at the same time, are you playing to win? You've got a chance to do the 2-for-1, and you've already shown this year that you can do it. So I just don't get the contradiction in saying that you're playing to win at the end of the game with the offensive strategy they went with, and then you've got time on the clock, plenty of time. Again, it's only 4 seconds left and they scored a touchdown against North Carolina State. It's only 12 seconds less than when they scored a touchdown against Tennessee State. They've shown that they can do it. So and really, even if you're not going to score a touchdown, you only need to pick up about 35 yards or so to
Right.
give yourself a realistic chance
Well,
to
and
be
if
in
you got
field
this
goal
kicker
range.
with all this leg, then it
Exactly.
shouldn't be an issue either. And so
Exactly.
I just think it was really weak of Marcus Freeman, because you want to show the message to Ohio State that you're not going to back down.
So,
And that's what they did. They ended up backing down at that time. And, you know, in all these situations, I always think back, because Tony Romo says this in every game that he does. You always give your team a chance on that first play, and then you see what happens on the second play.
Yes, that's exactly it. And again, you've got 2 timeouts, so you can run anything you want on that first play. It
Any
doesn't
type
have
of
to
play.
be,
And as long as you get about 10 yards or so, that's when you put it into high gear.
Look at the pass play they ran on the first play of the last offensive possession that they had in the game, with the quick pass to Rico Flores. They get a first down. He could have gone out of bounds. He stayed in bounds, kept the clock. Like, that's all you need is something similar to that. It's get that first down, and then, like you said, give your team a chance, see what happens. Johnny says, can you imagine if it was a pick six? Risk reward just isn't enough in that situation. See, I disagree. Like, what's the difference in the risk reward against North Carolina State in that situation? How is it any different?
You're afraid of your opponent. That's what it was.
Right. It's just a difference in opponent, and it's only a 3-point game. Like Todd Blackledge said at the time, he would be shocked if they tried to do anything. Noah Eagle on the broadcast was saying, well, will he try to go down and get a field goal? Blackledge responds, no, I think he'll just kneel on it. And that's what they ended up doing. They go kneel down, they go to the locker room, second week in a row with timeouts at their disposal, and they opt not to go for it. I completely agree. I would have at least, again, run that first play, see what you're able to get on that first play. You've got 2 timeouts. Use the timeout if you want to. If not, kneel on it, go to the locker room after that. Or see if Ohio State calls a timeout, like they're going to get the ball back. But that's not the way they opted to go. How about the pass rush? It remains a little bit of a mystery. And here's what Marcus Freeman said yesterday about his team's pass rush.
I think we had 1 sack right in the game. Had a couple QB hits and pressures. We got there, we just didn't get there enough. It's never enough. But I thought the D-line and the different pressure packages that we had was effective, especially in that last drive. It was effective. That got them into those 3rd and long or 4th and long situations. Then we have to convert. We have to convert defensively. All 11 guys have to convert on those long yardage situations. And so, again, we're always gonna try to improve, right? And we're never sad. We're greedy people. And so, do we got to be better at pass rush? Absolutely. Do we have to be better at pass defense? Yeah. And we're top something in the country. I don't know, top 2 in the country. And so, we have to improve in all areas. Absolutely.
They are actually number 5 in pass efficiency defense. They slid a little bit. They rank 109th, though, in sacks. Jesse, did Saturday show that even the best pass defense is still going to be stressed and challenged if you don't take the quarterback down more often?
Yeah, it'll definitely be stress, but let me put it like this. If stress means giving up 17 points against, one of the nation's, I wouldn't say best offense, but some of the best offensive talent, then I'll take that every day of the week, right? Like, it's not like Notre Dame lost this game because McCord was sitting back there and just picking apart Notre Dame and they weren't getting enough pressure. Like, that's not the case. And so, to me, I said this kind of last week, sacks and pass rush helps your secondary. And the secondary just defended the best wide receiver room in the country without getting much help. I'm not worried about it, to be honest with you. I think Notre Dame has tremendous players in the secondary, and they'll figure it out on the defensive line. They'll do what they need to get the job done. And I think that's really the most I can say about it.
Yeah, I mean, the secondary is playing so well, but 1 sack, 2 hurries. Again, they rank 109th in sacks right now. They're just not getting to the quarterbacks. I don't think it's going to be any easier this week because you've got another mobile quarterback. The objective isn't necessarily sack this guy. We'll talk about more about Riley Leonard and the Duke offense as this week goes on. And Brian's actually going to do a show at 8:00 tonight. He's going to be talking about Duke as he kind of looks to turn the page a little bit and get on to Duke. But, sacks are going to be hard to come by against Duke. But again, that's not going to be the name of the game against them. I agree with what you're saying, though, Jess, as we look at some of the positives coming out of this game. Notre Dame's secondary, I think, has to be at the top of the list. Now, can you nitpick and say, well, where were they on 3rd and 19? Of course you can. And that's part of the conundrum of this defense, because as you start to look at some of Notre Dame's numbers, once again, they rank very respectably. With the exception of the sacks, they rank pretty well, like in better than the top half of the country in a lot of these different statistical categories. But it is in the key situations like 3rd and 19, get off the field on those kind of things. That's what cost them. One of the things that cost them this game.
It's just really frustrating because the times Notre Dame really needs to be sound in coverage, that 3rd and 19 play, and maybe we'll get into this in a little bit. I hated that call on defense. I hated. They did exactly what Ohio State wanted them to do in terms of that 3rd and 19 play. But it was just like, and the same thing on that 4th and 7 play. Notre Dame's defense plays really well. And then when they want to do something to be advantageous to them, aka maybe, rush the quarter, give an extra guy on the quarterback, it actually doesn't help the secondary out. Like that 4th and 7 play, they sent 2 linebackers. Like I'm not kidding you. And I people are going to maybe think I'm lying, but I turned to Naomi before that 4th and 7 play. And I said, the middle of the field is going to be open. They're going to hit a play over the middle of the field and get this first down. Yeah. And that's exactly what they did. They brought 2 linebackers instead of dropping 1 linebacker into the hole, right? Over the middle of the field. They haven't got a sack all game. Why are you bringing 2 linebackers on 4th and 7? You haven't got a sack all game. Drop that linebacker into coverage. And it's just stuff. It's the stuff
I would like
that.
to see them, and we talked about this yesterday, like, okay, if you're going to play zone, how about zone blitz stuff?
That's what I mean.
Put somebody down and then drop him back into coverage over the middle, catch the quarterback. That's how you're going to make a still relatively inexperienced quarterback, as talented as Cal McCord is. That's how you're going to make him make mistakes, by surprising him with something like that. Don't just drop 8 into coverage because you want to play zone. Put somebody down in a 3-point stance on the line and then drop him off and catch him off guard and see if you can make a mistake out of it. But that's not what I mean. They did. Like,
instead of just bringing the same old straight up blitzes, you bringing, like, if you're going to bring a blitz, do something that you haven't shown all game. You know what I mean? Like, the moments call for the right stuff, but just it's the same old bland stuff that they've been doing the whole game. So Ohio State knows if they're going to blitz, okay, it's this blitz. We've already seen this 5 times, before this. So it's just like when Notre Dame really thought that they were helping themselves, they were shooting themselves in the foot on some of those critical plays. And I know it's easy to say now, but there's just little things they did wrong in those critical plays.
Zachary, thanks for the super chat. He said poor execution and still held the lead until the last play. They had to come back versus different feel from previous Ohio State losses, nuanced victory inside of an L. Well, I wouldn't say nuanced victory. I don't, as Vince has said right from the beginning, I don't go for moral victories in this case. A win is a win and a loss is a loss. They're not like, maybe it was a moral victory in 2017 when you lost by a point to Georgia at home after the horrible 2016 season that you had. And they went on, put together a solid 2017 season, won a bowl game at the end to end up with double-digit wins. You go on with a run of 5 consecutive, double-digit win seasons. And, of course, they make the college football playoff the next year for the first time. In that case, okay, maybe I can see a moral victory, but that's like really where they are right now, 7 years removed from that awful 4-8 2016 season. There are no moral victories anymore because Notre Dame, again, like whether it's Georgia, now, did they completely implode in that rain game at Michigan Stadium? a few years ago that you were at, Jesse, when you and your buddy got soaked in the rain there, watching the Wolverines beat the snot out of Notre Dame? Yeah, but they have played, like the year before they beat Michigan at home. They played another close game with Georgia. They've played close games against these good teams, but in the regular season and not come through. It's typically been in the, and they beat Clemson a couple of times, obviously. It's been in the playoffs where, against the big opponents, have really thumped Notre Dame. So I don't think for the regular season, I don't think we're talking about moral victories anymore.
Yeah, I think the only moral victory you can take away from this game, and a little bit of what I was kind of preluding to earlier, of things that like you can be happy about and use down the road in this brutal stretch that Notre Dame is about to go on, is the different type of players that we're seeing on the field now. I think that's the only moral victory that you can take in this, because the difference makers for Notre Dame in the second half when they started scoring points were the young guys, the freshmen, the Rico Flores, the Jeremiah Love, the Jabron Payne. You know what I mean? Like, if you're going to be morally happy about something, it's that look at the players that were the game changers, how young they are, and the talent. And those are Marcus Freeman guys, and how those guys are now competing with Ohio State at such a young time in their career. And like, that's the biggest thing. And the thing I applaud Marcus Freeman for the most is his willingness to get those young guys ready for this game, because they were the difference maker, playing them in all those games, getting them times against teams that they should have beat, allowing those freshmen to play, prepared them for the big moment against Ohio State, and they were ready for it, and they're freshmen. And so if you want to be positive about something, think about all these young recruits that are coming in and all these freshmen that are playing now. They're going to take Notre Dame to that next level.
This is, what Brian said. It's basically what I was going to say. He said the juke move on the cornerback. I mean, Rico Flores was a dude out there Saturday. He had been playing, but Saturday was the most snaps that he's had this season. He had 3 catches, scored a touchdown. I mean, he was out there, and he was a big part of the game plan out there. Just one example of the freshman. Jaden Greathouse, obviously. Jeremiah Love. These guys have come to play, and they're playing. Let me kind of spin this back to what Zachary was talking about, because he wants to pin moral victory. I won't go moral victory, but I asked Vince this yesterday, Jesse, so I'll ask you. So if we're looking at Marcus Freeman and this learning curve that he has, if he goes from Marshall and Stanford losses in year 1 to a 3-point loss due to shaky decisions against number 4 Ohio State, and we're assuming that nothing disastrous happens against the quote-unquote teams that they are supposed to beat over the course of the rest of the season. So, like, if this is the worst thing, some shaky decisions in, albeit a very high-profile game against a very good opponent, if that's the learning curve, can you live with that?
I've went back and ever since you sent this to me, I've been back and forth on this question, because I don't feel like I don't feel confident in an answer either way, because I can't live with losing to Ohio State by 3 points on the last play of the game due to multiple coaching decisions in the last 4 minutes that put Notre Dame in its not best position to win the game. But then you look at it on the flip side of Marcus Freeman's evolution as a head coach, and to be in that situation, he obviously had to grow from last season, right? Like, he had to learn from the mistakes that you brought up, the Marshalls
Correct.
and the Stanfords. But the thing is after those games, he still coached really good games and ultimately lost. Like the USC game, they lost, but he still coached well and still made some coaching decisions that ultimately kind of maybe cost them the game after what they did to Clemson. And so for me, I felt like he turned that page more so last year. I'm going to say no, because you can't lose. You can't waste the opportunity to beat Ohio State at home as a head coach in the second year because of decisions that you and your coaching staff made. Like, he's going to learn from it and get better, but I still can't live with how that game ended because of Marcus Freeman and his coaching staff.
Yeah, I mean it's tough to stomach, obviously, because it's a game that they should have won. And like Michael says, he can if Freeman learns from it, which he seems to do. And that's my point. He has learned from.
Ask me after game 12 this season.
Well, and that's okay. Let's assume they take care of business. Whatever the loss happens to be, they're 10-2 at the end of the season, and you don't have a disastrous ending in that in that second loss. Again, like to go from losing games that there's no reason you should have lost in year one to, okay, you made a blunder against one of the two biggest opponents you're going to play in year two. You made some blunders. They cost you. You lost the game. But now you learn from that. You go on. You have another double-digit win season. You're probably, at the very worst, going to be in a New Year's Six bowl. And again, you learn from it. Because as we were talking about yesterday, he has now coached in 19 games as a head coach. So there's still not a very big body of experience that he has when he has had to make these decisions. And when you're in a big game like that, the decisions, one, they get magnified, and two, they come at you a lot quicker when you're the guy calling the shots.
Yeah. And yeah, so when you look at it with that sort of perspective, that's what I think that's why this question made it so difficult, because I'm leaning towards yes, but then seeing what happened against Ohio State, I just ultimately can't say, I can't fully give you a confident yes at the moment because of that. You know what I mean? Like, he showed so much stride from last year's Stanford game, and like, that's great and all, and it's obviously better than last year, but like, that's last year. And I really just, like, they needed to win that game to get a resounding yes for me, I think is what I'm getting at.
Terry asking why Parker hasn't spoken to the press. The coordinators talked to the media on Tuesday, so he will be doing that today, and we will see some of the things that he has asked and what his responses are, both he and Al Golden over there at the Irish Athletics Center today. So that will be interesting to see what those responses end up being. Okay, so before we move on, you touched on the secondary. Anything else you want to shine a positive spin on? Any positive things that you took from that game Saturday night before we move on?
Yeah, so I talked about, the secondary, like you said, and just how they shut down the top wide receiver in the nation. 3 catches, 32 yards. No wide receiver on Ohio State went over 100 yards. You can go down the list. The second, I think you could say that Hart and Benjamin Morrison are the best, corner duo in the country. And I don't think you get a lot of argument from a lot of people. I think the secondary is tremendous. They lived up to the hype. They battled back. They gave up some plays here and there. But overall, you couldn't ask for a better day from the secondary. The other thing I touched on was player preparation. And again, that I just love Marcus Freeman's.
Let me ask you this about DJ Brown, because a lot of people are down on DJ Brown. And I mean, he obviously had an interception in his hands there at the end. Man, watching that replay, I realize it was off his.
It's a hard ball to catch.
That was not an easy, like, with the still photos, when you see the ball right in his hands, it looks like, how could he not catch that? But the way he had to move to get in that position and to go up just to get his hands on it, that was not an easy play to make.
I just wish he would have went up with like one hand and punched it or something, so like people wouldn't even have the opportunity to think about it, right? Because he's dropping basically into, they were bracketed.
If he's Kyle Hamilton, that's an easy interception because Hamilton's
right. But that ball was
like
high, and he did enough to just get his hands on it, right? Yeah. And so that's a hard ball when you're contorting your body, you're dropping under coverage and trying to make an interception at the same time. That's hard. And no one should be down on DJ Brown. He also played a tremendous game. Unfortunately, the thing that sticks out is the still photo of that ball in his hands.
I agree.
That he doesn't catch. And so I think everyone in the secondary was tremendous. And then, like I was saying about player preparation, just Marcus Freeman getting these young guys into action early and allowing them to have a prominent role in the second half. Because, I'm going to be honest with you, Estime wasn't getting the job done. And then they switched to Love and, some of these Jadarian Price, Jabron Payne. they switched to these different running backs. They went to 2-back sets, and all of a sudden they're running the ball. They combined for like 175 rushing yards as a team, and Audric Estime was only like 75 of those yards, right? And that was him getting the majority of the workload, the most amount of carries. So I think Notre Dame, and that goes to my next point, Notre Dame has a tremendous offensive line and running back room, and I'd like to see them use those 2-back sets more because they were highly effective against a really good team. And those are the things, like they have so much depth at running back, and their offensive line is just so stout that I'm almost asking them to run the ball a little bit more, knowing that they have Sam Hartman in kind of in the background too. So that was another big takeaway I took from the game. And then the last thing I'll say,
hold on. Only thing I didn't like about the running game, and again, I voiced my concern about there should have been more running in that last, like yesterday. Again, we went over it quite a bit, but after Audric Estime gains 11 yards on that,
how do you not give it to him?
How do you not give it to him at least one more time and then force Ohio State's hands one way or another? Even if he gets stuffed, the clock is running. Force their hand on if they're going to use the timeout, make them have to make a decision, call another play after that. I don't know how you don't hand it to him at least one more time.
And so everyone, I think I might have texted you this, or we were on the phone. I can't remember. I've said this to so many people, and it's the part that hurts the most. Everyone gets wrapped up on those last 2 plays and having 10 guys on the field, whatever. I don't care about that. It's the part that led up to them having that opportunity that really pisses me off. The 4th and 19, the 4th and 7, the 3rd and 19, all of that stuff. It doesn't matter. Notre Dame just banged out 2 first downs. Rico Flores, Audric Estime. The Ohio State defense is gassed. I was listening to an interview with Joe Alt and Zeke Correll today. They even said it, how they were leaning on those guys. They could feel it that those Ohio State guys didn't want it anymore. And what do? You go to a 2-back RPO look. All you had to do was get into the I formation or single back and hand that thing off to Estime 3 more times. I guarantee he gets the first down and the game is over. But what do? You run a gimmicky RPO play. You run a screen play the next play. And now you're completely out of the game, and you're giving Ohio State a chance. I'm more upset with that 2-play sequence than I am with anything else that happened in that game.
Yep.
And that's where I'll leave that one at.
Every point. Yep. Wish I had my bell. I would have been dinging it with you.
But I will say to kind of close this off finally, in that same interview that I was listening to, Zeke Correll made a statement that I think should have the rest of us excited and just anticipating this stretch of games that Notre Dame is going to be playing, because he said good teams after a loss like that will look for answers, but great teams will come together and find solutions. And we're a solution-based program, and we're going to find solutions going forward. And I think that should give all of us as fans just something to just really be excited about, because these guys aren't getting down on it. They're looking for solutions and how to be better going forward. And I think they have a tremendous opportunity to finish out this season and do everything and achieve everything that they thought that they could achieve before losing to Ohio State.
I agree. Wicked Broncos got a couple super chats. Thank you very much, Wicked. He said he was at the game Saturday night. I've never been so dejected after a loss. Thought the refs were terrible, but didn't cost us the game. I find it funny Ohio State fans on Twitter are acting like they blew us out, though. And I'm sure you're hearing from more Ohio State fans, Jesse. And again, you live in Cleveland. I'm sure you're hearing from more Ohio State fans after the game than you actually heard from before the game.
Yeah. So it was funny. I knew the onslaught was coming from Ohio State fans. I'm not going to lie to anyone. The game was over, and within 5 minutes, my phone was off, and I got into bed and I went to bed. I just didn't want to do it. I didn't want to have to deal. Like, I didn't even know the 10-man thing was a thing until the next morning. That's how I just wanted to get away from it, because I knew it was going to be toxic, and I knew there were going to be so many fans and so many people trying to bother me that it wasn't worth it at the end of the day. So yeah, I've even gone into work this week because I don't even want to face all of my Ohio State coworkers. I've just been working from home the last 2 days. So I still feel it. And that's the worst part. I still, as a fan, it sounds crazy, but like I still feel it. I still feel dejected from it. It sucks. But again, like these players have already kind of shown, it's just time to move on. There's great opportunities ahead of this team to really prove themselves.
Another super chat from Wicked Broncos. I still don't understand how the defensive line couldn't dominate that awful Ohio State offensive line that Indiana killed. I'm starting to get fed up with Riley Mills. Dude has tons of potential, but he can't show it in the game. Give us more Brennan Vernon. I don't know that Brennan Vernon is ready for that kind of role. Like
give me more Burnham though, Josh. You know what I mean? Like what?
Yeah.
What?
But they play different. They play different positions.
Yeah,
though, anyway.
I know what you mean, but it was still overall frustrating. Yeah, because this offense, so Ohio State offensive line wasn't supposed to be as great, and again, Notre Dame couldn't do anything to get home with the pressures and stuff. And so, is that player? Is that Al Golden not designing up schemes that are getting players free better? Like what does that cocktail look like? What does that recipe look like?
It seems like, and in training camp, I said I thought that this was going to be a really disruptive defensive line, but that is not what we've seen. It seems like what Al Golden wants is for these defensive linemen to just chew up blocks and let the linebackers make the plays. But the other side of that's so frustrating is, again, we have to go back and talk about a guy like Maris Leofau, who is out there on the field practically the whole game and doesn't make one tackle, while you also have an ineffective defensive line in terms of disruption and getting any real pressure on the quarterback. You only had 1 sack and 2 hurries. You can say that they affected the game in a couple of, a handful of plays, but ultimately they didn't affect it enough. But it's like, what exactly does Al Golden want from those guys?
Exactly. And I will say this, for what we're saying about the defensive line right now, Javonte John Baptiste was a bad man that game and played with bad intentions. I think he was the star of the defensive line. I don't know if that's been talked about. But that man,
we haven't touched on him enough. He did. He had a great game.
Tremendous game against Ohio State. And I would be if they didn't have him, I would hate to know kind of what that looked like. Same to go with Howard Cross. And Howard Cross doesn't get as, the hype or the sexiness because he plays interior defensive line, right? Like your job is to take on the double team and that's really it. But Howard Cross, again, him and Javonte John Baptiste played just phenomenal games amongst the defensive line. I thought Bertrand played a tremendous game as well. Could the tackling have been better in some spots? Sure, but that goes across the board for the entire Notre Dame defense.
Yeah, like Brian said, wrong type of defensive line to eat up blocks. I agree, because they are not big, massive, hulking 320, 330-pound space eaters.
Yeah, and they're not running up the center a lot.
Yeah, exactly. It's a little bit baffling. One more super chat from Wicked Broncos. They said, need to stop having refs in the booth or on the field from the away team's conference. The game reminded me of the USC game last year. Tons of non-called holding calls.
Yes.
On the Ohio
State.
This
allows me to talk about this a little bit. I didn't want to get into this, but I mean, when someone drops a $10 super chat, you got to talk on it a little bit. Why was every Notre Dame play reviewable, but it seemed like every Ohio State play, there was no review? Like literally every play that was close on Notre Dame. I still don't know how Sam Hartman came up short on that 4th down. How was there enough evidence to overturn that?
There wasn't. There was, because as I said, because I went back and watched that, and what the rules analyst was trying to say
was the ball was on his back shoulder instead of the upfield.
Yeah, that the ball wasn't forward enough when he went out of bounds. Well, the problem with that is he's got, I think it was his left foot was inbounds, and then he takes that long stride with his right foot that lands almost on the, the big white sideline. Basically, he almost stepped all the way over the sideline on that big stride. Well, you're not out of bounds until your foot, whatever part of your body, steps out of bounds. By the time he stepped actually out of bounds, the ball was another half yard forward, and he had easily crossed the line to gain with that long stride that he took out of bounds. The rules analyst tried to make it sound like Hartman was out of bounds as soon as his foot, in the air was hovering over that out of bounds. sideline.
If that were the case, guys who dive for touchdowns would never get them as their body is falling out of bounds.
Right. It's just like on a pass that goes out of bounds, the clock does not stop until the ball actually hits out of bounds. Just because it has crossed the sideline does not mean that it is out of bounds. It was horrible. They had no reason to overturn Hartman's that 4th and 1 on the sideline.
Well,
There's no reason. They had no justification to do it.
And the other thing that drives me absolutely insane is, how is that a reviewable play because Ryan Day comes screaming down the sideline? That's not a thing in college, Like a coach just can't start screaming and start demanding that a play be reviewed.
I want to clarify this because Brian asks, isn't it where the ball goes out of bounds? Yes, but again, it's where the ball goes out of bounds, but it is also it's basically where the ball is when your body goes out of bounds. And you are not technically out of bounds until you take that step or you fall or wherever out of bounds. So the ball was still going forward as he is taking that stride, and it has to be spotted where the ball is when his first body part comes out of bounds. And it was at the 16.5-yard line. All he had to do was get to the 17. So he had crossed the 17 and he was at the 16.5. It's where the ball is when your body actually comes out of bounds.
And what's crazy is a ball call on the field was first down. I don't understand how there was any sort of it's insurmountable amount of evidence to say that there was enough to say that he didn't get it. And again, that sucks. It's such a huge critical swinging point in the game. And a lot of people right now are also just screaming at Al Golden. Just give that up. The man is a good defensive coordinator. And we often look at his 1 or 2, 3 deficient plays per game and highlight those. I think he's great. I think he has some things he needs to clean up. But overall, Al Golden is a good defensive coordinator, and I like what he does at Notre Dame.
Yeah, El Conquistador. I don't know. I think maybe we're confusing this. We're making this more complicated than it has to be. He asks, if it's where the ball goes out of bounds, then how is it that receivers catch balls out of bounds, but their feet are in? Yeah, I mean, that's okay. So I see. I think that he is, kind of backing what we say. That's exactly right. Like if that was their justification for overturning it, then again, like if you catch a ball sideline, toe tap, it's where the ball is when you make the toe tap. You're not out of bounds until you actually step out of bounds. So it's ridiculous that they overturned it. Jesse, let's not get hung up on that. We actually did get hung up on it a little bit longer. How about this? Are you ready for rapid fire?
I am ready for rapid fire.
Let me ask you this, my friend. Who'll run for more yards this Saturday? Audric Estime or Duke quarterback Riley Leonard?
I'm going to go with Audric Estime. These dual threat quarterbacks haven't provided much of a kryptonite, to the Notre Dame defense so far. And Notre Dame has the players to handle a more mobile quarterback, right? Like they're a very athletic team. They're a very athletic defense. That means, more Maris, a little bit more Jalen Sneed. That's what it's going to be. And even if it's Jack Kaiser or JD Bertrand, I think those guys are just as athletic as Riley Leonard. So I have no worries that Notre Dame is going to do their job in containing Riley Leonard in terms of his feet this weekend. You just got to be able to manage more so of the RPO plays that are designed basically, like the triple option of a pass or run. I think that's more so what you have to be concerned about is doing your job in terms of the RPO offense and staying sound to that, because when you don't do that, that's when the big plays are going to get busted, right? And so Notre Dame has to play really disciplined football in terms of their RPO reads this weekend.
Yeah, I agree. Like when you look at what Leonard has done, he's got 238 total rushing yards. His best game was 98 in the opener against Clemson. So he's got almost half of it in that opening game. He had another 97-yard game as well after that. I think it was last week. Brennan Armstrong has similar numbers, though. Brennan Armstrong, 225 yards. His worst game was 26 yards against Notre Dame. They've done a really good job with their defensive game plans against the mobile guy. I mean, Brennan Armstrong obviously being the best. Now, Leonard, probably a little bit better passer, but at the same time, they're also very similar to North Carolina State. Not a downfield offense. They're not a team that's going to stretch the field with their receivers. Estime's worst game was this past week when he had 70 yards and he averaged 5 yards a carry. I think Estime is going to end up with another really good game against Duke this week, against a good defense. But Duke also, like, I'm not trying to knock Duke because Mike Elko's got a good defense, but let's face it, Clemson is still the best team that they've played so far. And how good is Clemson, you know? And so I think Estime is going to have another really good game against Duke this week. So I think it is going to be Estime bruising his way to another big game for the Fighting Irish.
Yeah, and the thing that helps too is Notre Dame has this template, right? There, it's not like they haven't had to prepare for a mobile quarterback before, right? So they have a template they can follow. They know what's kind of worked. Their players aren't comfortable are comfortable with kind of, going about game week preparation for a quarterback like this. Now is when you just kind of make little tweaks dependent, more so depending on what kind of backfired against NC State and, prior opponents. And then things that, worked a little bit and things that you want to just basically, and the added factors that Riley Leonard will also add too, because he's not the same quarterback as Brennan Armstrong. So you're just going to tweak a little couple things, but you already have the template for what's already worked.
Yeah. Fill in the blank. It's blank that Notre Dame, Ohio State was NBC's most watched regular season college football game since the 1993 Notre Dame, Florida State game.
It's not shocking. You're talking about Notre Dame, and you're talking about, one of the most prominent teams in the last, what you want to say, 2 decades, 3 decades, maybe, right? Like when you think of college football over the last 20 to 30 years, you think of Alabama, you think of Ohio State, you think of Georgia, Clemson. And then, Notre Dame is obviously there too for its own reasons. But if we're talking about pedigree of football and being really good football program, Ohio State is up there. And so when you combine that with Notre Dame, I just think it's expected at this point.
Here are some of the numbers. The 93 Notre Dame Florida State game averaged 22 million viewers, which is like a huge, I couldn't believe it when I saw that. 22 million for Notre Dame Florida State in 1993. Now, no streamers, the viewing options are a lot. TV has changed a lot in 30 years, but I mean, like 22 million today is NFL game numbers. That's like a Sunday night football game type number, NFL game. Notre Dame's Ohio State game Saturday averaged 10.5 million. So less than half, but still by today's numbers, it is big. And it peaked at 14 million during that fourth quarter late in the game between 10:30 and 10:45 Eastern time during the comeback. I've heard a lot of NBC is going to push Notre Dame into the Big Ten and all that kind of stuff. Let's remember, though, that like you said, 1, it's Notre Dame, and 2, it's Ohio State. And Ohio State has a huge national TV audience as well. Like their TV games are pretty healthy.
Bandwagon people.
That's right. That's why Fox, is willing to pony up the money so that they have Ohio State. So you can jump on that. The top 3 rated markets were Columbus, Ohio, Cleveland, and Cincinnati. That's across the country. So like the top 3 markets watching this game
all in
were
Ohio.
The 3 biggest markets in this, in the state of Ohio. And then after that, it was Indianapolis, Detroit, Chicago. After that, interesting, West Palm Beach, Florida, Tampa, Florida, Nashville, and then Norfolk, Virginia. But the bottom line, it is a massive number by today's standards, biggest number in 30 years. And you can see why NBC, was interested in this primetime TV package with the Big Ten. And I think it's going to be, I don't think it's going to be an either or, like a lot of people think that it's going to be, that this all of a sudden means that Notre Dame has to jump into the Big Ten. Let's not forget that in the last 30 years, they've played Michigan at home a lot, 10 times to be exact. None of those games got this kind of number.
Yeah.
The 2005 Bush Push game didn't get this kind of number.
Last year's Ohio State game didn't get that. Well, that wasn't on NBC.
That was not on NBC, but that's my point. So, but big number, and I think that it's ultimately going to be good for everybody. I think it's going to be very good for Notre Dame when you think about the fact that NBC does already have the partnership with the Big Ten, and Notre Dame wants to keep its own partnership with NBC. I think that's going to bode very well for Notre Dame down the road. So with Notre Dame's game against Louisville announced yesterday for a 7:30 kickoff, the Irish are going to now have 4 consecutive primetime games. And Marcus Freeman was asked about it yesterday. He actually found out about the fact that Louisville was going to be a 7:30 kickoff. And here's what he said about the 4 straight 7:30 p.m. primetime kickoffs.
Yeah, with the you're adding the travel now. We'll get home from Duke around 3:30 in the morning. And so as I think to the following week for Louisville, we have to take that into consideration. I haven't put together the itinerary yet, the practice schedule and all those things, but we have to take that into consideration. That was one of those things we talked about from last year that I've learned. Like, every week truly isn't the same, and just because we're playing at night versus Duke and versus Louisville, you have to take into consideration when you get home. And so that will change a little bit of the practice structure, but it shouldn't be too much.
Scale of 1 to 10, Jess, how big a deal is it that it's going to be 4 consecutive primetime games for the Fighting Irish?
So I'm going to put this at a big a deal, like 10 being, wow, like this is an extraordinary deal. I think it's got to be like a 6 or 7 range for me. And it's not so much that it's like the prime time or that it's at 7:30. Marcus Freeman actually beat me to the punch and what he was talking about. Like, it sucks getting back from those games really early in the morning, right? And so what that means is, and Marcus Freeman didn't really go into depth about this, is, last year, and I think this changes ultimately why Marcus Freeman switched up when they have their off day, because it used to be their off day was Monday, right? Well, what good does it do to have practice on Sunday when you're getting home at 3:30, 4 o'clock in the morning? So I think that's one
Especially
thing
if you are playing late night games like this.
Right. And so I think that's the one thing that he learned last year is Notre Dame's going to play primetime games. We're going to get back late. We can't be practicing the next day because it's basically just a loss of a day, right? And so that's the only fear that I have is when you do these week after week after week is you're kind of compounding. Instead of having maybe a full day mentally there on Monday, maybe you're only half mentally there, right? Like, all I worry about is when you get back that late at night is the body can't recover it like it needs to. And then second of all, what are you losing in terms of preparation for that week because of, you're losing a half day, right?
Where do you have to make some adjustments for like
where are you compromising at, right?
Yeah,
like if your guys aren't fully recovered for a practice on Monday, what good does it do type situation? And so when you're only getting maybe a half a practice on Monday, and then the next week you're getting another half a practice on Monday, and then next week you're getting another half a practice on Monday. Well, at this point, now you've lost out on maybe a full, day or two of good practice because of stuff that you can't control, of getting back late at night at 3:34 in the morning. But that's the price you pay of being at Notre Dame, because you're going to play in the primetime games. Everyone wants to schedule you in the primetime games, whether you're home or away. And it's just but having them 4 weeks in a row, that's really unfortunate. And to have them again, and ultimately your biggest stretch of the season in a row as well, that's also unfortunate. And so when you weigh all those things together, it's a solid 6 or 7 for me.
Okay. It's going to be the first time in Notre Dame history that they've played 4 straight primetime games. I'll just say this to kind of tie it back. We were talking about TV just a minute ago. Seems like even though Notre Dame isn't a full member of the ACC, they sure are adding some value to the TV contract the ACC has with ESPN. The fact that they're putting the Duke game against Notre Dame in primetime. They're going to college. They're going to Durham for college game day. And then they're going to put the Louisville game in primetime. And then, of course, you've got that sandwiched in between the 2 games on NBC. I put my concern level below where Jesse put his. I put mine. I understand some of the concerns that he was talking about there. I put mine at probably a 4. Remember 2018 when Notre Dame went to San Diego to play Navy, and then they went to technically Evanston, but Chicago to play Northwestern. Then they came back home and played a game. From there, they went out to the Bronx to play in Yankee Stadium against Syracuse. And then after that, back out to the West Coast to play USC in Los Angeles. So 2 trips to the West Coast, a trip to the East Coast, a trip to Chicago, that's a 5-game stretch where, they were bouncing all over the country, and they ended up winning out that stretch. They made it to the college football playoff for the first time. So I think you're right. There are some things that are going to have to be addressed, but they started kind of around that time. They started doing some things in terms of rest, recovery, all the massage, the different, like the recovery chambers that they have and all that different kind of stuff. So I think they'll navigate it okay. And I think, as somebody said, at least if you have to play it like that, and you do have the 2 road games back to back like that, at least it kind of lets you get into a routine over that 4-week stretch, because you are having consistent game time. So you can set your week up pretty much the same.
You can get into a rhythm early.
Yeah, exactly. Although, as Marcus Freeman said, it does change a little bit, because you're going to go on the road and play a couple of those games when you get back into town. Louisville's going to be a little bit quicker return. I mean, honestly, by the time you get in the air, it's only a little bit farther than going to Chicago, and you're in the big plane, so you can put the hammer down a little bit. I think we've chartered back.
You got to ask the guy that's flown a lot.
Yeah. Now you can make that flight in about 30 minutes, basically, is what I'm saying. It's not going to take you that long by the time the plane gets in the air. So Tim Brando from Fox Sports says he thinks that mid to lower tier Big Ten conference teams like Purdue, Indiana, and Illinois are better served playing Friday night games, because they'll get more attention than if they play on Saturdays. Do you buy or sell that?
That's a sell, and even more sell for me. This isn't high school football anymore. These kids sign up to play Saturday. I just know, like, I just feel like it takes away kind of from what college football is about to me. You play on Saturday, NFL plays on Sunday. Okay, yeah, the Thursday and Monday stuff, that's fine. But you only do that, each team is only going to do that probably one time a season, right? Thursday and Monday. When we're talking about moving all these games to Friday, it's just childish to me. That's high school football. We're beyond that. And yeah, there's really nothing else I kind of have to say about that.
The only place that I'm torn is the fact that you're playing on Fridays. And I'm not, Vince and I think, have talked about this before. I don't like the idea of playing on Fridays, because Fridays are supposed to be from high school football, or for high school football. But if I remove that and I just look at it from the point of view of the programs themselves, because like a couple of weeks ago, Kansas was playing Illinois on a Friday night. And it's like, oh, wow. It's, Kansas, my alma mater. So I'm going to watch that game. And, it turned out to be a pretty good game for them. And it's like, I got a chance to watch them because they were playing on Friday night. And so if I look at it only from the perspective of the teams themselves, these kind of teams, the Purdue's, Indiana's, the Illinois', the Kansas of the world, those kind of programs, I do think that it is better for them. Now, is it better for high school football? Of course not, because you're taking away the attention from high school football. But if I look at it just from the perspective of those programs and giving themselves that spotlight by playing standalone games on a Friday night, I do think that it is better for them, because they get more attention that way.
Yeah. And that's ultimately kind of like the double-edged sword of the situation. And the rebuttal to come kind of my argument is that it's better for the programs themselves, because they're going to get more exposure. More exposure means more recruits are watching, down the line, etc. And obviously they're probably going to make a little bit more money in terms of, what they're able to do in terms of viewership and all of those things, because it's like one of 3 options on Friday instead of like 1 in 20 options on Saturday.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the point. I think that's the point that Brando was making, because the Big Ten is doing these Friday night games, and you're going to get buried in the middle of Saturday when all these ranked teams are playing. So you're going to get more attention on yourselves if you're playing on Friday night. Thanks for another super chat from Wicked Bronco. He says, it just baffles me that Indiana did better against Ohio State's offensive line than we did. That's inexcusable. Also, what about the muggings Ohio State got away with on our wide receivers? Overall, best secondary in college football. Don't have a letdown versus Duke. To the first part, I will just say that it was a season opener, and you can kind of surprise some teams. Teams are still figuring things out in a season opener. That's the only excuse I would give there. Now, as to the other stuff, I'll let you respond.
Yes, I'm gonna go with these one at a time too. It's so you can't compare one aspect of a game to a completely different aspect of a game, right? Like it's not an apples to apples comparison. That's just not how it goes. The transitive property doesn't really work in terms of position groups from the first game to the fourth game, right? Did I want Notre Dame to do better? Right. Correct, of course. Do I think that they, in some regards, underperformed in terms of sacks and pressures? Yeah, but like Marcus Freeman said, when are you ever satisfied? So I'll leave that one at that one. The muggings on the wide receivers. Listen, I hate to be the guy that, again, blames refs or anything like that, and I'm not going to, but were there some situations where it felt like Notre Dame wide receivers didn't get the fair call? Yes, I will definitely say that as well, but that happens in just about every game. And that's the frustrating, inconsistent part of referees, especially Big Ten college referees. And then overall best secondary in college football, I think that is not debatable at this point, considering, their pass efficiency defense, their secondary rankings, and what Hart, Benjamin Morrison, Watts, Brown, Ramon Henderson did to the Ohio State receiving corps and limited to them. I think they did a tremendous job. And then don't have a letdown versus Duke. I think if Notre Dame plays up to, how they're supposed to, the Notre Dame way, and they move on from this and let this kind of Ohio State bitterness fuel them into this game, I think that Notre Dame dominates Duke, to be honest with you. I think that Duke just is simply outmatched. And they're, like you said earlier, their best win is against an average Clemson team at best. And it was their first game of the season. So
if Ken Young goes on the Pat McAfee show Friday and says that Notre Dame is soft, like that's what they, they need
that's not what Notre Dame needs to get them fired up.
I believe Ken Young, the guy from The Hangover and, some of the other, I think he does like the Masked Singer or what, that guy. I think he is one of the more famous pop culture type Duke alums, not non-basketball,
right?
Duke alums. He's the one that comes to mind right away. So maybe a little Ken Young zinger would get Marcus Freeman and company inspired, and then we see Marcus Freeman go on a rant
after the game.
Yes.
Terry Tyler brings up a good point. Duke flies to the football. I mean, we all know Greg Elko runs a defense that is first and foremost fast. They're going to play relentless. They're going to play hard. They're always going to fly the ball. That's not going to be a question on Saturday. I think Notre Dame still outmatches
Duke did, or not. NC State did too. Same kind of thing.
And I think Notre Dame still outmatches Duke's defense, but more importantly, I just don't see anything in Duke's offense that Notre Dame's defense should be scared about. As long as they prepare how they're supposed to and don't become arrogant and handle business, I think Notre Dame will dominate against Duke this weekend.
Concur. Joe asks if Ken is the guest picker. I was just pulling that name out of
They don't announce that until like Thursday or Friday.
So yeah, I don't think we'll find out until later. I'll be interested to see, do they go the basketball route? Do they go the obvious route and have Coach K come on and do some picks? Do they go like Grant Hill, Christian Laettner, again, like the basketball route? They can't go Danny Dimes because he'll be playing. So I don't know.
Yeah, I'm curious to see who they go with as well. Just these last couple comments in the chat. Have you seen the rumblings about the Michigan State thing? I wanted to send you this article before the game, but
just leave that. I saw it before the show. I need to read up on it a little bit more.
Potential material down the road this week.
I think it's ridiculous from the general.
That's basically what I wanted to get at. I wanted to laugh at it.
Yeah. Okay, last question for you tonight. The crowd reaction shot has become one of the staples of sports TV broadcasts. You've got the TV cameras showing the reaction, of random fans, and someone always becomes a meme and stuff like that. That's one thing. But the ever popular friends and family reaction shot when the player either does well or does something bad. What do you think of the friends and family reaction shots during games?
I think the friends and family shots are just like cringy material. And what's even more cringy is like the parent interviews in the stands where like you could barely hear what their parents are saying, and they're obviously so nervous and so just tunnel visioned on the game. It's like, what are you guys even doing bothering these people? You know what I mean? And so at the end of the day, that's what it is for me. It's annoying, it's cringy, and it's like, why can't you just let these people enjoy the game? That's what they've come here to do. They didn't come here to be in the spotlight any further. They came here to get away, watch their significant other, son, daughter, whoever it might be, niece, nephew, brother, sister, play the game, and that's it. You know, like they're already under the microscope all the rest of the days of the week. Just let them enjoy the game and be just as nervous and excited as the rest of us.
It's like, oh, he completed a pass. Mom is nervous. Dad is stoic, sitting there, no expression on his face. Yeah. What's he thinking? I don't know.
It's like with the Cubs. They just called up, Pete Crow Armstrong, and every at bat, it's a cut to his parents and friends in the stands, and they're sitting. It's like he'll get his first hit. We don't need to see his parents, as he gets the first hit. It's gonna happen regardless.
Right. Let it breathe. Let it breathe. It's like everyone, almost, I won't say everyone, almost everyone has family. And guess what? If they do something good, they're going to get excited. If they don't do something good, they're going to be upset. Or, if there's going to be some tension, there's going to be some drama. Like, did you see the Clemson kicker in the Clemson Florida State game? Like the whole thing with the guy who had left the team, but he was still enrolled in an online graduate course. And so they brought him back on the team because he was still enrolled in school, and he got to kick, and he made an early field goal. But then when the game was on the line, he missed a field goal that could have won it for him. And they're doing the cutaway shots to the friends and the the parents and the family and the whole thing. And it's
like, what does he have to do? What do they have to do with that?
Exactly. Again, it's like, of course, they're his parents. They're going to be excited. Do we need to build this? And then, of course, the whole, like the Taylor Swift thing took it to a whole nother level with Travis Kelce over the weekend.
I muted Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce on Twitter.com. I'm already over it. Any post, I have their names muted, so I don't even see it anymore.
X.com?
Yeah, I don't have it anymore. I highly recommend people take the same steps. Just mute certain words and you won't see any of it.
It is just too much.
It's nauseating.
I know. Estime wants to know if Notre Dame has any soccer players that can kick 30 yards.
They should go the Cowboys route, baby. Aubrey hasn't missed yet. It's the only shining spot.
Knock on wood, he hasn't. You're right about that. Brandon Aubrey, former Notre Dame soccer player, kicking it. He is. He was definitely the only bright spot last week. That's for sure. Sunday, 2 days ago.
It was a tough weekend for you and I. I hope no one brought that up yesterday for you.
Yeah. Well, we had other things to talk about. So
I thought someone would sneak in.
Oh,
Sean,
I forgot. I've got a
bad weekend.
I forgot one more question. Cowboys. One more question that you found. I forgot. I was gonna to slip
some extra credit.
Yes. So San Diego Padres pitcher Josh Hader refused to enter last night's game for the chance at a 4-out save. The Padres are 5.5 games out of the wild card race. And of course, this is the final week of the season. And Hader is going to be a free agent after the season. He reportedly said, "Are we in a playoff race?" when he was approached about going in for a 4-out save, which he has not been asked to do at any point this season. So is this fair or foul that Hader refused to go in the game for a 4-out save?
I lean both ways, but ultimately I lean more foul. At the end of the day, I get it. He's a free agent at the end of the year. He's pissed that he has to be in San Diego. He never wanted to be traded there from Milwaukee. Milwaukee's going on to the playoffs this year. Blah, blah, blah. He doesn't want to risk injury for next season. But come on, man. You're getting paid for this season. Your team is asking you to just go out there and pitch one more out, and you're telling me you're looking to your boss, your head coach, your team. You're just saying, "No, I can't do that. I'm not going to do that. That's not what personally benefits me." Come on, man. There's like 5 games left in the regular season, like outside of a freak accident, your arm and elbow is going to be fine, right?
And that's why I'm good with it. Again, they haven't asked him to get a 4-out save all season. I realize he's a professional. He's getting paid, like you said. He's going to be a free agent, though, and they're not going to make the playoffs. And if they had a chance to make the playoffs, I'd say get in there and do it. And I'm sure that he would do it. But why should he take any risk in the last week of the season at doing more than he has been asked to do at any point this season when he stands to make even more money next year with his next contract?
Yeah, I get it. I just think it's insane that he straight up was just like, nope. Are we? Is this going to get us to the playoffs? Like,
he's like, I'm out of here. I'm eating fish tacos. Adios.
Like, and that's why I led both ways, right? Because he's got to look after himself. He's got the big contract coming next season. We know how, pitchers' arms can be. We just saw what happened with Ohtani. Like, I get it. It's definitely a concern, but it would be one thing again if they were asking him to go for like a 2-inning save, a 6-out save, but to me, one more out isn't going to push the needle for me.
I concur. All right, well, we will definitely wrap it up on that. We had a lot of good stuff once again tonight, and we will be back tomorrow, and we'll probably spend, I don't know, it's mailbag day tomorrow.
I was going to say, you don't know what the people are going to ask you.
That's right. We've got a lot more to talk about this week. And again, Brian's going to be coming up at 8 o'clock tonight. He will take a look at Duke as well. Thank you very much, Joe Allen. Appreciate it. He said, great show, guys. Make sure to like it, peeps. That's right. And we appreciate it when you do hit that.
Even the Ohio
like
State
button.
Bucknut said he liked and subscribed. So all of you people can do
Did he really?
Yeah.
Wow. See, we've got Bucknuts guys jumping on and subscribing to the show. So I thought for the most part, he was fairly well behaved. I don't think he took any cheap shots or anything. Larry says he mutes anything with Swift as well. That's a good idea. All right. Hit the like button on your way out. And of course, subscribe, rate, and review. And we'll talk to you tomorrow on IB Nation Sports Talk.